My advice would be to get well intoxicated before showing up. And then just, oh no. Oh, no, learn about the latest sightings of Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and aliens. And whenever anybody brings up something related to government, trail off. Trail off. That's your best bet.
Or talk about ghost ships. Let's bring.
Yes, let's talk about ghost ships. Let's bring this back to port.
Sorry, guys. There's some
not.
extra editing for you, Dan.
That's all good. It's all good. So ghost ships. There are two kinds of flavors of ghost ships when I hear the term ghost ships. I think many people are going to think the same thing. One is you have the haunted vessels, something more of like the Queen Mary, for instance, which I was on, but more of that later. And then you have, or like the Flying Dutchman, those types of ships, or the legendary, ghost ships or something like that. And then you have this other grouping of ships where they find the vessel and nobody is there. Or sometimes people are there and they might be in weird, like, the stories are frozen, like positions, or their mouths, their faces are all contorted or something like that.
Yeah.
A lot of times what they find is the same. It's the crew is gone. The lifeboats may or may not be gone. The food might be on the table. There's still plenty of food.
Yeah.
I know at least on one of them, it looked like that they were in the middle of a meal when all of a sudden everyone was gone. So in my research, like I said in the past, history and English, my two worst areas of knowledge. And I think with history, most of that is because of names. So I have 30 ships here that I was able to locate, and a lot of them, for me, it's kind of like, wait, which one is this? What is that?
Yeah. We will talk about 4 of them today because of our tangents.
We sure will. We sure will. Okay, the top 4 that I found, we have, if we want to talk about the Queen Mary and the Flying Dutchman, those are more of like the haunted kind of legendary ships.
Yeah.
And then we have the Mary Celeste and the Octavius. So I'm thinking we could start maybe with some of those and then maybe branch out and see what others are floating alongside of us and see where we end up.
Yeah. See what floats up in the...
Bob, why don't you start with the Mary Celeste? I feel like that is the most well-known story.
Yeah, so the Mary Celeste was one that... okay, so we've got this ship. Okay, so it was a merchant ship. Okay, you're talking about the 1870s here. And the mystery has never been fully solved, which is good, because that leaves us some open ends to play with. The ship, I believe it sails out, the crew disappears, it reappears with the lifeboat missing, and then it sails off again, and it recurs like several times over. Several people find the Mary Celeste. I'm trying to think if this was the one. All right, so one of the explanations for this was that it got a hole during its voyage. It's got a hole in its hull, and it takes on water, but it doesn't sink enough. So the crew gets freaked out, takes the lifeboat out because they think this ship is sinking. But what happens is it actually reaches a certain level of equilibrium because there's not enough to actually capsize the thing because of the location of the hole. So it actually reaches a balance and then just continues floating around. Perfect cover-up story for what was clearly mermaids, but we'll get to them. But the Mary Celeste, this is one that's been documented to show up several times, is believed to be an actual 100%, well, 100%, a high likelihood that this is actually just a ship that's floating out there that's being carried around by ocean currents and is still trucking about. I believe its last sighting. Okay, well, its last log entry was 1872. That's not what I asked for. I thought you were supposed to be AI. It's just giving me 1872. This reeks of a cover-up.
Okay, so a quick search on my end. It was found and operated for 7 more years before sinking in 1885.
All right. So you see, this isn't even accurate. This is... Yeah. Google used to be good.
I think that's a new corporate slogan, you know.
Yeah, yeah. That's right.
But it used to be like "do no evil" or something like that, or like, and
Yeah, now it's like,
we used to be good, and it kind of means, you know, it's a little bit of a double entendre.
So what I found, it says in 1885, the ship was intentionally crashed into, I can't pronounce that, a reef off the coast of Haiti. Okay. Which again, to your point, sounds like cover up. You know,
Yeah.
why would they intentionally crash and sink the boat? Cover
Like, it's
up.
full of ghosts. I feel like that's why it was.
Mermaid ghosts.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's more to that story than meets the eye.
Something weird that I came across that's like interesting, and I guess it's probably more relates to the like the more folklore thing, but like a lot of ghost ships, like there's like at least dozens of them, tend to appear as like lights, like flaming kind of things, because I guess they were burned, you know, like the idea like they were like set on fire. So when they reappear, they're on fire. Like, but the whole like ghost ships and ghost lights are like pretty much like related, I guess, because like, you know, until more recent times, the like instances of like things like St. Elmo's fire, like basically static charges and stuff building up around the masts and things would cause like plasma glows, so things would glow, you know, like they'd have like a, you know, like a essentially like, now that happens with planes and things too, but it's that like, but yeah, like, so there's this like weird like ghost lights and ghost ships often appear in the same way. I know, like they're like, so when people see a lot of ghost ships, like, or at least in the past, that appear as like, I guess that's, I guess, isn't that what the Flying Dutchman is supposed to look like? It's supposed to be kind of glowing, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know, and it's just like, so this like, but it's like, so they kind of like, so these ghost ships often appear like as these kind of like phantom lit up ships off the horizon or whatever, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, the Flying Dutchman's an interesting one. And there's some like debate about it, because there are variations in the captain's name, there are variations in where it was supposed to have sailed from and things like that. But the Flying Dutchman is interesting, and yeah, and when that shows up, it's supposed to be a straight up ghost ship. It's like its sails are fully billowed even when it's in headwind. It's just this weird. That was probably the one in Garfield's Halloween.
And I think that Pirates of the Caribbean, like most of it is centered around that, at least in the main trilogy, I
Yeah.
guess, is centered around that shit.
You know, like the Flying Dutchman seems to be one that like drove a lot of this kind of thing. I mean, it still does kind of go back to, I mean, it's a weird story of haunting when you take it to the sea. You know, because is it that different than the Headless Riders? You know, a boat where they never reach they're constantly searching for their destination. I'll back up a little. So the Flying Dutchman was supposed to be a boat that was captained by various names, as I mentioned, but Hendrik van der Decken.
I was gonna say Van Tassel at first.
Yeah, see, it's back to the Headless Riders again. Yeah, but yeah, if there's a van in there, you're. There was one of the names was given was
or
like
Van Gogh, earless writer, no, earless painter,
no, or Van Damme. Well, there was a Van Damme that was one of the. It was one of the names given for a captain of this ship. All right, everybody, let's talk about. Let's talk about Hendrik van der
Jean-Claude
Decken.
Van Damme,
Van der
famous
Decken.
captain of the
Famous
blood
captain
sport.
of the Time Cop, the USS Time Cop. The USS Double Impact
Street
back
Fighter.
on the sea. Yeah, so this boat goes out on the ocean, as one would, and is sailing around the Cape of Good Hope, which is known for being like rough weather.
Yeah, a terrible name for.
Yeah, like ironically
irony.
named Cape of Good Hope, or aptly named because hope is the only thing that's gonna get you past it. And so he's pushing through here, and there are terrible storms, and there are variations on this. One is that the crew mutinies, because in almost every account of this, the captain is an asshole. That seems believable. So in most of these, the captain's an asshole.
Well, because it's like merchant, vessels at the time. You were basically like indentured servitude, like you were conscripted, meaning you got drunk in a bar and they like you end up on a boat. Now you're
Yeah.
on a boat. Like,
Yeah.
it's it's like, yeah, like you don't have a lot of, there's not a lot of,
It's the opposite of the stowaway.
yeah.
Which probably comes from stole away. I stole away on a boat. I stow away. So, but yeah, the opposite of that is that you got stole away. You got drunk and kidnapped. But yeah, so the crew mutinies, and in one version of it, Vanderdecken shoots the leader of the mutiny and throws him overboard. After which, some supernatural figure shows up and says basically, "You're an unreasonable man, Vanderdecken, if that is your name, and now you're gonna have to rethink your ways." And then he shoots at the figure, which in some accounts it ricochets or it comes right back to him and shoots him in the hand. Vanderdecken gets shot in the paw, and then we've got the curse. You will forever roam the seas, unable to reach your destination, you and your crew. Which at this point, the crew has to feel like the dog in To Build a Fire. Like, what the heck did you have to add more twigs for? Asshole. So, yeah, we would have got there eventually. So, and then it roams the sea forever. And other ships see it. And if you see, which you'd wonder how they know about this part, if you see it, you die. And then somehow that gets back to, like, someone wrote it in a bottle right as their last moments. But yeah, so you've got this ghost ship with a ghost crew of the dead, forever piloting, or sailing the sea. And really bad luck if you ever see it. Another version of it, they're going around this thing, Cape of Good Hope, and they say, "Hey, we can't do this. We gotta stop." And he just is insisting on it, and he says something to the effect of, "By God or by the devil, I'll sail this sea, blah, 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 blah." And so, punished for his hubris, here comes either God or the devil, or an angel, depending on the telling, that says, "Wish granted, you will forever sail this sea," and whatever. So this is the cursed ship, the Flying Dutchman, reported by various sailors as being something they see at sea or whatever. But it's this, and it drives all kinds of things. It was a big cultural splash. Sorry for the water joke. A big cultural splash. It shows up in all kinds of things. Not the uncoolest of which, because One Piece is really cool. On One Piece, as I won't tell you where, because you gotta watch it. It's only like 1,100 episodes at current telling. So
Yes.
guess where it is. If you know it, don't put it in the comments, people. Other people haven't seen it yet, but if you haven't seen it, guess where it might be. Especially if you've never seen One Piece at all, just guess wildly where it could be. So, the Rime of the Ancient Mariner is very likely at least partially inspired by this telling, or this story of the Flying Dutchman. Yeah, also partially inspired probably by whatever Samuel Taylor Coleridge was imbibing at the time. Water everywhere, nor any drop to drink, right? So there's a captain, also an asshole, who decides after they've had this good weather or whatever, and so he gets ticked off or not ticked off. Help me out, guys. Is it good weather that causes them to shoot the albatross, or bad weather that causes them to shoot the albatross? I feel like it's like good weather, and they're saying the crew has kind of made the albatross kind of their little mascot, and the captain gets mad and shoots the albatross. After which, the curses of heaven come upon them, and they're forever. They don't have any good winds after that. So the crew hangs the albatross around his neck to remind him of what a bad thing he did. And then everybody dies, and everybody's stuck at sea forever. But at night, oh no, the captain doesn't die at first. At night, his crew gets up and pilots this thing, but he's forever stuck at sea. And then now and then, so until he finally looks into the ocean and sees the slimy things and blesses them, realizing that they're kind of okay too. And then the albatross falls off his neck into the ocean, and he can come to port. But he has to travel the world for the rest of his life, or maybe for the rest of time, to tell this tale so nobody else does it. And he gets this guy about to go into his wedding and tells him this long ass story.
If there's something seemingly stereotypical about sea captains, is they really do like to tell tales. So this might not necessarily be a curse for him. This might actually be like just his deal. Like, I'll tell you a tale. Like, oh god,
You have
here
to
we go
stay
again.
in character forever. Yeah,
Like,
yeah. So that is. Who else do we have?
The weird Bermuda Triangle thing, or it's like, but at least it's related. But that like, it's like the Carol A. Deering, right? It's pretty modern when it's like modern compared to a lot of ghost ship type things.
Yeah.
It's like lost in the 20s, and it's lost off of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, so in the Outer Banks, which it's like, but the thing is, the boat comes, like, same thing, like Dad's saying, it comes ashore. It's like there's like they find the boat. It's like the crew is all gone, but there's still like food and everything. They don't know what happened to the crew. It's like that kind of idea. There's it's just like, but they know that there was actually like an investigation that ended up happening by the State Department and things involved in it, because somebody claimed they found a message in a bottle, which later turned out to be fake. It's like that the person made up, that it basically said like they were attacked by I guess it was something like oil, like an oil crew, like a whaling oil crew or something like that, like whatever it was, like, and it gave rise to, at the time, there's like, the people are scared about like Bolsheviks and stuff, because it's just like, so this, like, so it's like the 20s, and so there's like the State Department stuff gets involved. They start investigating this thing, and the Navy and all, and they like, and part of the investigation is like, well, they were in Barbados, and the captain had an argument with the crew, so like there might be a possibility that there was mutiny, something like that happened, or for some reason there was cause for them to abandon ship, but in coming up back, like in their travels up the coast, they had gone through what would then be later known as like, the Bermuda Triangle thing. So like, this is one of the earlier, like, even though it's before the whole Bermuda Triangle hype and stuff like that, it kind of falls as one of the earlier parts of the Bermuda Triangle being like a bad area. But if anybody knows anything about the the Outer Banks in North Carolina, shipwrecks are not an uncommon thing there. If there's going to be a ghost shipyard, that's notorious pirate haven for like people like Blackbeard and things, like hanging out, pirating ships around there, and like it's very hard to navigate. Lots of ships go, it's like, it might as well be, but this ship didn't wreck, it just was missing its crew, but it could have hit bad weather and the crew abandoned the ship and then were lost at sea, but the ship didn't actually sink. But still, it's like, it's again that weird thing, like it's just like, well, why is it there? But yeah, it's like, so that gives into it's like used as some of the Bermuda Triangle speculation of like, well, maybe it was they got lost in the Bermuda Triangle and then the boat just got out or something like like that kind of idea. So that's kind of a weird one. Another thing I came across, and this isn't like exactly a ghost ship, but it's counted as this. It was like the the reports from like 2013 or something, but it's like an old Russian cruise vessel that they were basically decommissioning, like a luxury cruiser, and had been in service for a while. I guess it had like Arctic, like it could navigate Arctic waters or whatever. And on its way to take it to be scrapped, it disconnected from the boat. I got lost out, and it was like out in the Atlantic somewhere, just floating. And like there was like tabloid stories about how the boat was this like luxury cruise ship was overrun by cannibal rats. Like, and there was like all these people worried that like, oh, it might like end up in Ireland or in the UK, like it might like crash there, and with all these cannibal rats on board. And I just like had this like really funny idea of like this kind of like Ratatouille idea of like all these rats on a cruise ship like party. And I'm like, oh, this, like it's not really a ghost ship. I mean, it's a ghost ship in the sense of like there's no crew or anything, and then I'm guessing it just got lost in the Atlantic somewhere and sank. But it's partying rats on a on an abandoned luxury liner.
And for fun, what was the name of that ship?
It was the.
Because I would hear you say that it's a Russian vessel.
No, I don't. It's named after a Russian actress. I'm not going to go for. Let's see if I can pull it up in my thing. Yeah, it's like something like Olgov or something like that. It's the Lyubov Orlova. I don't know. Don't get mad at me, Russian language.
You did a better job than I would have done.
I am. Yeah, this is not a. This is. I'm sorry. I apologize for butchering your.
Here's a weird one. I only just encountered it, so it's like I don't even know the full story on this. The Joyita in 1955 was found drifting. No crew, no distress call, and all the clocks stopped at the same time. Weird.
Yeah, that's kind of that's weird that all the clocks stopped at the same time. Maybe it was like electromagnetic. No. So here's a weird thing. Do we count in ghost ship lore? You think like the Philadelphia experiment counts towards ghost ships lore?
I thought about that.
Because I mean it does disappear as supposedly and reappear later on. Its crew is definitely, according to the legend, not in very good shape. Considering they're supposedly fused into things. If in fact that is a thing, but that's a kind of a weird one.
And that's so talking about. We talked about the Titanic in one of the past episodes, and I think it was a Sleepy Hollow episode actually. I was talking about how different things I really find so fascinating. The Philadelphia experiment is one of those that falls in that category for me. Just so cool, so weird. It has a little bit of everything. It has seemingly a time slip. It has teleportation, people being trapped, becoming one with the ship, all kinds of really, really things that make for a really, really great story. Yeah. I'd have to look into that a little bit more, but I'm pretty sure if I remember right, there's so much more story to it than fact. Or is it? Yeah. So we'll definitely have to explore that one a little bit more because I love that story. That's an awesome one. But I definitely think that kind of falls into it. The whole concept, it appears, disappears. I can't remember how long that took place, if it was over the span of a couple minutes or days. As far as I know, it was never replicated again. I think it was just during that very small window. People saw it, and I think it was obviously Philadelphia. I think down in I'll say it was down in Maryland. And then in New York, I want to say too, but I can't quite remember the full story. But I feel like that was it. You don't hear from it again. Like people don't see it again.
Yeah. That would be kind of interesting if they did, if it just kept popping up in random places. Yeah. So seemingly like obviously there's just like ghost ships that are just like, this is just abandoned, like rats are now the crew, right? Like they're just like people aren't on them, and then there's just like mythical ghost ship, right? Like often the crew of the damned, or these like one ships that were set on fire, and like now they're like these glowing, ghostly things. When we start talking about the like things, like I guess it's like, what's the scary version? I guess it is the crew of the damned, right? Like because like if you see them, you die, right? That's kind of usually, or it's like
Yeah.
it's a bad omen. Like so, seeing I guess like, but again, it's like I think it's only is it a bad omen only for sailors or people going on a voyage? Are we less worried about it because we don't do a lot of like other than like for the average person who doesn't do like commercial stuff or like sport fishing or or owns a super yacht,
Right.
like most
Right.
people are not sailing as much as they were, back in the day when that was like if you wanted to get across the ocean to another continent, you needed to get on a boat. And now it's
Yeah.
like, well, we get on a boat for fun or we get on a boat for like a luxury cruiser. You did like, and aside from that one, you don't hear too much about like the the Flying Dutchman version of like the I don't know Carnival cruise ship.
Right. Right.
Oh God, it's by the tourists of the day. Like the captain
Yeah.
was a real jerk, and then all the tourists mutinied, and now it's like and there's like the Disney Cruise Line of the damned. It's a I mean unless it was
Like
themed
none
that
of this
way.
honeydew is ripe. Throw 'em over.
Yeah, yeah. They said all inclusive. It's not. Yeah, like
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah, they don't seem to have that. Those tend to be the ones that are more like that type that we mentioned before, like there's something haunted on the ship. Oh, don't be in room number. I don't know how they room number these. I've never been on a cruise.
deck
I'm on
12
too many lists. I'm on
versus.
too many watch lists. Yeah, like, but that kind of thing is like, oh yeah, this was a ship that this thing happened on, and I'm sure if you talk to the crews on those ships, whether things actually happened on them or not, I'm sure a lot of them have haunted places because you're wandering around in the ocean and there's a 24-hour crew, like who's on the night shift? Somebody has to be. It's not like everybody just goes to sleep at night and like, I'm sure everything will be fine. But
When we were in California on vacation, we went aboard the Queen Mary, and I recommend that tour for anyone. I would have loved to do. There's like a late night tour that I think it starts at like 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock or
mhm.
something like that, and you can actually walk around. You get access to different parts of the ship that you normally don't get as part of the whatever. They have several different tours, so this was like a little more encompassing. But it was very cool. The different stories that they had. Apparently there's this figure that been seen on the stairway, and there's a story behind it. I think someone fell down the steps or got pushed down the steps or something like that, and now there's this entity that haunts that area or something like that. Then there's another one of the cabins. There's allegedly a ghost in one of them that you can see it in the mirror, I think. And you turn around, nothing's there. Something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah.
And then the pool area. Apparently, there is when I was there, they told us there are cases people take photos, and then like later when you look at the photo, you can see an image of a person. And there's been consistency between the photos of like different people. So it's like someone took this picture 2 years ago, and then someone takes it today, and it's like you see this little girl, I think it is. And then there was another story I heard where the pool area has no water in it, but yet there were like someone saw like wet footprints when they were going through the tour. So a lot of really cool stories.
That's
So
great.
I recommend if anyone has the opportunity to go check out the Queen Mary, definitely do it. I
Yeah.
did not see anything. None of my photos had anything. None of my videos had anything. I'm very disappointed, but still, I recommend it.
I also wonder sometimes like which of these are like conducive to creating real hauntings. So if we go back to like the ghost rules kind of thing, it's like, well, why did you wind up as a ghost? you know or why is there an image here that's a replaying image of you as a ghost? Why? And one of the things we've talked about is the idea of extreme emotional situations might create some kind of an imprint on the environment, you know. Which gets really weird when you consider ships. Because, like, what was the environment? Like, so if there's a house, the house tends to stay there, at least in most versions of haunted houses. But ships don't. So it's not like, I mean, you can say, okay, like the Titanic is where it is, you know? Well, yeah, it's there in that space, you know? That could be a haunted space, right? But like,
It's really hard to go on a ghost tour though, the Titanic, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I would not advise it. I would not advise it. But yeah, yeah. So, and then so you've got ships that people, okay, so let's talk about the the SS Ourang Medan. Sorry, that's probably not how it's said.
That's actually pretty close. I actually looked that up ahead of time. That's
Oh,
pretty
good,
close.
good. So the crew is found dead. Horrified expressions on all their faces. They all like look, some of them died with their eyes open, you know, some of them like, but just these kind of ghastly things. And so if you're, and so people boarded the ship, and was this the one that had all the alcohol on board? It had a
I
bunch of,
believe, I believe so.
it had a bunch of what was believed to be alcohol on board. So the crew that enters the ship is like, well, it wasn't pirates. And also, why are all of these people dead with their faces like this? Like, what happened? What did they encounter?
Is this when they
So
were like frozen or something like that? Is that
these were
They're-
not frozen.
Yeah, there are two different stories. One is they were like legit frozen, like, you know, below 32 Celsius, you know, 32 Fahrenheit, 0 Celsius. This is more of just like atrophied.
Okay.
Yeah. And just kind of like, yeah, just like locked in, like expressions just locked on their bodies, you know, just rigor mortis, whatever, this is how they are. And so they decide, so the story is, so they see these, there are these, all these bodies and these barrels and things. They say, well, it's not pirates because they would have taken the alcohol. And it's not this, that, or the other. So they say, get off the ship. Like it's cursed, something's wrong, whatever. And then I believe, so I forget whether it was towing a lifeboat or something like that. But anyway, they decide they're gonna tow this thing. Actually, they're gonna tow it they're gonna try to tow it back to port or whatever. And it explodes. It just blows up, and all the evidence goes with it. Now, some of the accounts for it, again, some of the cover-ups, because that was obviously mermaids, because that would be scary, and it would make that happen.
It was the Kraken.
The Kraken is known to destroy. It doesn't usually leave. It doesn't like sneak on board and be like.
No, he blew it up.
Yeah, it blows up. And some people say, well, actually, what it was they were hauling chemicals, and these chemicals started a leak, or it's not it's not drinkable alcohol. It's industrial alcohol. And so what happened is there was this leak that wound up basically poisoning the crew.
Right.
And that's why, and that would explain why their faces were like that, because it actually causes these contortions. So that's one explanation. Let's see. Where was
I'll
it?
add to that it is considered to be a fictional story, but I think the timing of it, I believe it's like just post World War II. I think it was 1947, I think, which is
Yeah.
suspect. You know? So again, mermaids.
Yeah, mermaids. Yeah, because yeah. I mean, if we ever get into Gremlins, and planes, you know, we got some tie together here. World War II was a funny kind of time.
The other story, Bill, that you kind of sort of alluded to was, I just had it in front of me, the Octavius. That was found drifting near Greenland. Crew was frozen solid.
Yeah.
That was one where the captain has his log book right out, like he was like putting in a log, like or something like
Yeah.
that when they found him, like
Yeah.
you know. So it was like he just died.
Yeah, like frozen mid sentence, basically. Yeah.
That's
Yeah, and that was one where, so yeah, allegedly they took, according to the logs or whatever, they were leaving, was it Jakarta? I believe it was an Asian destination. So they're in might be Indian Ocean. Decide anyway. Realize I don't know how to pronounce things, and I don't know my geography. They go through the Northwest Passage, which was like rather warm at this time, and they thought, well, maybe we'll be able to get through it. Now, no one had done that before successfully, and so the ship disappears. According to the logs, I guess like there were things were going well at first, and then they started to encounter ice and things like that, and so froze to death. But let's get back to the ghost thing. Well, that could do it. That could do it. Like you're stuck at sea. You don't know what's going to happen. You're running out of food. There's a lot of probably not sleeping too well because it's cold. You've got a lot of psychological turmoil. You're in the biggest liminal space anyone's ever been in, except for space itself. I would say that might be grounds for a real haunting. And yeah, so supposedly people boarded this ship and were able to get. In fact, I'm not sure if that's even supposed. I think that might just be a straight up real recovery. But I think what happens is they leave the ship, and then I think the ship floats off again. So I don't think they actually recovered the ship so much as the logbook.
I wonder if we do get to a point where we have like more frequent travel into space, like that's becomes more of a if we get there.
Yeah.
The path that's a little squirrely path right now, but like if we do get to that where we're like, like I wonder if we're gonna have like more like, well, this like something got lost or something, and then like then it gets caught into some kind of gravitational thing, like comes back around, and then like people see or claim to see like ghost spaceships or things like that, or is that just UFOs? Like I mean, like I guess we all already have that in a sense,
Yeah.
but it's like like something like, oh god, it's like, what is this thing? Like, is it like maybe it's the abandoned whatever crew of the it's like, yeah, I just think it's kind of funny because it's like you were just saying how space is this other like the next big liminal space, liminal
Yeah.
space that's like this kind of unexplored, and like right now it's pretty, the amount of people going out there and seeing things is pretty low, but like if it does get to a point where we have like some kind of moon colonies, Mars like stations and things like that, stuff that's like kind of like early colonial type stuff, if we're gonna be like there's ghosts, because there's gonna be a good chance a lot there that something happens to a lot of ships that things don't make it, or like, because I mean that's kind of what happens in these the age of exploration type deals, it's there's a good chance if people decide that they want to go to Mars to build something, that something's going to go wrong. Like, so, it's like, it seems like a high probability of that.
Yeah, because you'll still have the phenomenon of going with the lowest bidder.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So it's like, so I just feel like this, like, these kind of, what if we get ghost spaceships? I mean, it's kind of in Star Trek, right? There's like ghost, like often like
I mean, like,
abandoned ships and things like that. So there's like, so it seems like it's already kind of primed for that.
I would say you definitely have the second kind,
Yeah,
where something's haunted on the ship, and then, yeah, I think the first kind too. But it has that same problem of like when you've got something that vast,
yeah,
are you likely to encounter it again? But I don't know. You're not likely to encounter the Flying Dutchman and things either, but that was spotted allegedly by German ships at the end of the 1800s, and
But I have to question that, how much of that is more of wanting to come back with a story, or you think you see something and it's like, well, it must be that ship.
like,
I mean, it could be the actual, like, just like the like explanation for ghost ship like this, like it had a crew and they abandoned ship for some reason, and that's the thing you see, but you see it there and you're like, well, it's got to be the Flying Dutchman, or you see like like again a ship that got like was getting towed somewhere and it got loose and it's now just floating around the sea, like it's like you might just like it's like, I guess it does sound better when You know,
And
so
going back to that side of things for the ghost ships, the abandoned ones, it's interesting. A lot of them have the same pattern where it's people are in the middle of doing something, all of a sudden they're gone. A lifeboat may or may not be gone. Food may or may not be on the table. It's interesting that, and no signs of struggle in most of these cases.
Hmm.
So it's interesting that whatever happened freaked the people out enough that they left the boat either willingly or unwillingly,
Yeah.
to leave this stable floating environment to go on a smaller floating environment in the middle of no. It's just so
Yeah.
interesting. Like what causes that?
well, I mean, I guess it would probably be like the one I was talking about that got lost off of like showed up in the Outer Banks or whatever. It's like the storms and stuff can turn really fast in there. If the big boat's going to go down, you don't want to be on, like you jump on the lifeboats, you get out or try to get off, like, because it's like if that thing
Hmm.
capsizes or something like that, they can
You got
turn
pulled
very,
under, yeah.
yeah, they can turn very quickly, and you might just be like, we have to leave. Like this storm is so bad, or this weather is things, or we don't know where we're going. Like the navigation is off, but like we got turned, whatever it is, like then they got
Hmm.
something's gonna happen. You're abandoning to hopefully try to survive and thinking the boat's going to go down anyway, and then it just doesn't for whatever reason. Like it just
Yeah.
happens to be like, oh, it didn't capsize, didn't it? But you're already, but maybe you died in the storm in the
Yeah.
lifeboat. It's
Yeah.
so
Which is
like
what's alleged with the Mary Celeste, that again, like, because it came back with no crew or anything like that,
yeah.
they never were found. Uh, so yeah, that's yeah, it's some creepiness for sure. Um, there's another thing that's like related to this. I don't know if we'll ever get into this kind of thing, but the phenomena of the USO, the unidentified submerged object, is a thing, and it's basically like UFOs that go underwater. Sometimes they actually like fly out of the water, and sometimes people just see them going into the water. But there's actually like enough of this in reporting that like it's its own thing. It's its own category of what is technically known as weird stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's piloted by it's crab aliens. I mean, crabs are probably alien. I mean, have you seen crabs and how many things turn into crabs? Eventually, they just evolve into crabs are aliens. That's probably it. It's just the crab alien.
Octopodes are
Yeah, yeah,
also
yeah,
high
yeah,
on the
yeah,
suspect
yeah,
list.
yeah. Well, they're all in league with each other. The crab aliens
They're in
and
20,000 leagues with each other.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, they're like, yeah. Until you really don't want to get like a crew that's like like crewed by a squid, and like a bunch of crabs,
Yeah.
crab aliens.
Yeah. That might be when we vote for this, that might be the scary version, but so with the USOs though, imagine this. You're you're a ship out at sea, and here's this glowing thing from the sky that goes under the water, or they're circling your boat, or any of that, because some of this is like Bermuda Triangle, so I kind of wonder, this is just pure conjecture, but like I wonder how many of these weird tales, if this actually even happens, if this isn't just
Well, yeah, it could be the whole like,
military weaponry that we don't know about, etc.
or just that weird like plasma buildup charges.
Yeah,
See, like,
yeah. There are other things with like the way light can refract and create basically like an ocean mirage of boats in the distance, or even cities in the sky. That's like another weird thing. That's like that goes into that Magonia airship traveler world stuff. Yeah, to talk about weird ships. There you go.
well, it's like similar to like I mean like I guess it like the idea of like you are just like, if you think about like I guess the ocean has a liminal space, right? Just as like this weird thing,
Yeah.
and you don't know. The madness does seem like an easy thing to start happening if you do get, out to sea and lost, and then you finally do make it back. You probably did, you might have just started going like losing it, just being like, it's a pretty isolated, especially back in the, like earlier days of just navigation, like going around the earth, not knowing where you're
Hmm.
going, what's going on, just it's kind of like, yeah, you might start like kind of losing
Well, I'm
it.
curious. Do either of you know how common that was, where like someone just like loses their stuff on the boat, and it's like they're freaking out, and they gotta maybe contain the person in some kind of way? Was that common? Does anyone know?
I don't know.
I mean,
I don't
like, I
know.
imagine it's got to be there's depending on like how long you're out at sea, it probably does kind of kind of like it seems to be a
Or just
common
someone build
trope
up to it
anyway.
where you're gone for a couple of days. You do that, several times, and you're gone for a week, for then maybe 10 days. Like you kind of build up a tolerance, maybe. But I have no idea. I don't know if
Yeah.
I don't know how big of a thing that
Can
could
you
be.
build up a tolerance to like weirdly like being like lost in a at sea? I don't know. The there does seem to be like lots of talk about like, people, what are like mutinying and piracy and things like that. So there's
Yeah,
always
I think realistically, the most likely offenders are pirates or mermaids.
Clearly, because we do have things about sensory deprivation and monotony causing cabin fever at
yeah.
sea. But yeah, of course, that would be a likely explanation, if they didn't want us to know. Um,
That's well,
yeah,
it's
there
the
is quite an
crown, man.
association with madness on the sea, though, actually. Um, Also, yeah, because you have to be a little bit crazy to go out there all the time in those, you know. You might have brought it with you. It might not be causally related.
So I think we could call this one solved. It's either,
Yeah.
people went mad and they decided to go for a walk on the ocean,
Hmm.
and people may or may not have gone after them and, walked on the ocean, or mermaids. I think this is solved. I think we could,
UFO crab people, I
or
think that's
or USO crab people. It's got to be one of
Yeah.
those. It's
Yep.
got to be one of those. Solved.
but
So, so
so
we've got.
or alcohol.
We're widening our fishing net here.
Yeah.
Um, so let's do a little vote on this, but let's do something a little fun. What would be the version that would get you close to five monsters? What would be the
Hmm.
version of this that would do that? So first of all, um, and I'll put a couple versions out there. One is stuck at sea forever, forced to travel these vast oceans
Like
forever.
you personally, like you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you
Yeah.
become the captain of the Flying Dutchman,
Yeah.
basically,
Or you
a
get
crew
woken
of the
up from your
damned or something like
slumber to
that.
pilot the ship or like work at night. That might be
Okay.
even worse than, because you're
Okay,
still stuck forever.
I need clarification on this. Does this
Yeah.
mean that like legit forever, like nothing can impede you from sailing the seas forever?
Until in these worlds, it seems to be until Judgment Day. So
Okay, all
at
right, okay.
worst, it would be however long the Earth's gonna last before the sun supernovas. And then at best, it would be tomorrow, because there's always another apocalypse. Apparently, there's always another reckoning. But then you might just get tossed into hell anyway. So I'm not entirely sure. So what would be scary for me? And then the other extreme is like being killed by pirates or being shredded to pieces by mermaids. I'm
I
gonna
think
say
okay,
that.
so give your rating as is and then make it a 5. This is like Mythbuster style,
Yeah.
It's like, what can we do to make this myth happen?
Yeah. So my rating as is, I'm gonna say it's still pretty damn creepy because you do have a non-zero chance of winding up on a boat, even if you're not likely to wind up on one. So I would say I'm gonna give it a solid 3, because I think liminal spaces, being stuck in a liminal space is pretty scary. And any of these versions, like being stuck in the ocean, even when I'm like in water that's like deeper than I really know what's under me, I can really freak myself out with that because you don't know what's down there. It could be anything, you know. Maybe not, but for me, it could be, you know, as soon as or like being in a, even just like being in like a canoe that's going over like a lake or something like that. I don't like that. I don't like not knowing what's under me like that. So yeah, you know what? To tell you the truth, almost any of these versions would be uncomfortable for me. Almost any of these would give me the creeps. So I'm gonna say right off the bat, solid 3 to 4 monsters. I'm gonna give it 4. Okay, I'll stop messing around. I'll give it 4 monsters because this kind of thing does kind of creep me out. And then to get it to 5 monsters, I think I'd have to be like the stuck in liminal space forever. Um, I think that would do it. That would because I don't know. I mean, can you achieve some kind of peace with that? Can you just accept it? I don't know. I think that would get it there for me. The least scary of all of them would probably be shredded to death by mermaids because to tell you the truth, it'd be over. It'd be over fast enough. Pirates might take you hostage. I don't like that either. That's a different kind of, yeah, like no. I'm going to say if I had to make my wish about which one it was, if I was stuck on the ship, mermaids. But the scariest one would be the liminal space. So tell me what your wish would be too then. Whoever wants to go next.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I like boats, like the whole sea thing, but it's just like yeah, it's like I'm a little like on the haunted ship thing. I think it's like cool to some degree, not but not as scary because like when you the big crazy ones, like right, the whole like Flying Dutchman. The idea is like you see it, you die. You know, that's it. You're gone, right? So it's like there's not a lot of like a lot of these things are like once you encounter it, it's all doom from here. So it's like so you don't really have like a chance. So it's not like you could get like it's not something that can really affect you in the long term because you're doomed. Yeah. So I probably like just in the general thing, just for sheer like creepy factor and like you know it's a thing unless you get back to tell the tale and it haunts you for the rest of your life. Well, that maybe would bring it up a little higher, you know, because it's like that's being stuck in a different type of liminal space. It's a liminal space of like I saw this ship and then all of my crew died and I just made it back by myself and like oh god like now I'm forced to tell this tale at every bar I get or whatever for the like it's like this is a different type of liminal space of madness you know but yeah so I'm ghost ships I think probably like in a weird sense more like less scary. So I'm gonna put it like probably like 2. So what would bring it up to a 5? I don't know. Out of the like you get yeah, you probably would be like being like recruited into the crew of the damned. So now you don't have like a you know you don't you're, so it's not just like you're like the person on the ship leading it around. Like you're forced to be like rowing or whatever while you know well, like hellhounds watch you or something like
Yeah.
that. You know, and you're and then like you can't ever make more, and you're always thirsty, and like like yeah, that would probably be like yeah, because it does kind of like a hell type situation already, right? You know, so that would probably be the one to bring it up because, like you said, like krakens, mermaids, sea monsters, crab aliens, like this is all just the Bermuda Triangle, like you know, all these things are going to end this pretty quick, you know, because you're not coming, you're not coming back from that. So yeah, so I think that's I probably agree with you, Chris. That bring it up that way would probably have to be in that realm of something that like being stuck in this sort of in between world forever or something, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's scary. All right.
So for me,
Yeah.
I think as the ghost ship in and of itself, like the Queen Mary or any of these other ones, these abandoned ships, I rate them very low. I think 1 for me. It was really cool being on the Queen Mary. It was docked, you know, just wandering around, like hoping that I would see something that I did not. You know, I ended up not seeing anything, obviously, like I said. Even the idea of the ghost ship, like just having it come back back to the dock and there's no one there, and it's just weird and creepy but cool. So I would be all about that. I don't find that scary at all, nothing about it. To make it a 5, honestly, it doesn't take very much. Put me on a boat in the ocean and we're pretty much at a 5. When we were kids, I don't think I told you guys this. I don't even know if you even witnessed this. But Bill, we were at your house swimming, and yeah, this huge inflatable island. And from my memory, I want to say it was maybe a 6-foot diameter. And we were swimming.
I remember that thing.
You do?
I remember that thing. Yeah.
Well, here's more of the story. So I was swimming underwater, and I went to come up, and I came up under the island, and I'm struggling to find where the island ends so I can actually get up and breathe. And it took me a good couple seconds, and which was a long time considering I was already ready to surface when I got stuck.
Yeah,
and I think
panicking a little bit.
Yeah, and that's kind of stuck with me my entire life. Anything with water. So for me, just being on a boat out at sea, I think that's enough. But if we wanted to take it up a notch to maybe 6 or something like that, for me, seeing probably a rogue wave coming at me, that would be terrifying. I think that would put it over the top. Followed by a kraken or something of that nature. That would be really, really cool, but also terrifying. But I think the rogue wave, that would be enough to just no.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. Scary. So what's the takeaway from this? What can we give these people? Anyone who's decided to stay here for some reason? Well, my first advice would be don't shoot an albatross. Because that seems to be one that's pretty easy to avoid. Or a ghost. Yeah, if something comes from the sky and tells you have a bad attitude about sailing, don't prove it by shooting them.
I would say go visit the Outer Banks, not during hurricane season. It's a very cool place, and I really like it a lot. Has some cool history with pirates and things, but maybe stay away from if you feel like sailing, on the, just be aware that there's lots of shipwrecks out there. Hopefully you're not out there on the boat, or just make sure it's a mild day.
And I said before, and I'll say it again, if you have the opportunity to go see the Queen Mary, and also if you go in the gift shop, you can buy a Ouija board there. So if you have that urge to do that, you can buy your Ouija board and try to contact some spirits while you're aboard the Queen Mary.
Yes. You guys didn't give very practical advice. You just went what to visit.
Oh, okay.
What if they encounter an albatross and they have an arrow?
We have look, we both work for different tourist associations. We need to get that.
That's right.
We gotta get that sponsorship in, okay? So.
I work for the Albatross Preservation Society.
That's
if you're on a ghost ship and there is still food at the table, don't eat any. You don't know what happened to it. Don't take deep breaths. You don't know what kind of fumes are running amok in the ship. Stay off of it.
And if you
do board it,
ships,
steal the alcohol.
Yes.
Do steal the alcohol.
If you've ever encountered something strange at ocean, are you a fisherman, fisherwoman? Are you a fishwoman or fishman? And know some things that happened to some of our missing sailors. Let us know. We'd like to know more. We're always willing to learn more. Please put it in the comments where the conversation continues.
I will also entertain untrue stories.
Yes. Or just an emoji.
Yeah, because this is the tales.
How about
this?
this?
Are the tall tales? We do. Sure.
How about this? If you made it this far, put a mermaid emoji in the comment.
Yes.